I decided to name this one as an experiment and in regards to illumination. It's an idea that I've been thinking about, and I haven't been able to. I'm going to try to put it to words. And I tried sketching it, and I wasn't really sure how to even sketch it. So I'm going to play around with it and see if I can get to happen what I want to happen. I think it is fairly common in art and seeing what I'm going to try to achieve, but I'm not quite sure how to achieve it. And I know I'm kind of just talking very cryptically with it. I just it's kind of when you just have that art drive and you're like, what do I do? How do I do this? And what I mean by all this is I want to have a tree with my brightest light behind it from the sky. And I don't want to just have the silhouette of the tree over it. I just don't want my brightest white, brightest light, and my darkest dark over that spot and just transpose and have that contrast there. I want to have the light start to envelop the sides of the tree. That's the best way I could put in words. Kind of read about it in art books, and I think I might have talked about it with like the Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. I'm just not quite sure, but it's what I want to achieve today, or try to achieve. So this is my experiment. So I already wet the paper. It's 11 by 15. I have my raw sienna. I want to leave an area light. Figure out where my horizon line is going to be. I don't really have much plans compositionally. But ultramarine. The ground here would be illuminated. But being the ground, should be darker in value than the sky. This is ultimately where I'll pull the tree from. Burnt sienna. Now to do this in watercolor, I had two ideas. The first was, do I go wet and wet and put that in and let it diffuse, and then come in on the center portion with a excuse me, with darker paint on dry paint. Or what do I do? Or do I dry it off first, then put it in, and then kind of lift the sides from there? Let's see. I got my ground a little bit darker in the foreground. I know that I'm going to have a row of trees back here, and these are going to be faded out. And I want to have that gap right there to see through the trees. So I'm going to dilly-dally back here a little bit. So we'll see the trunks. See the area behind the trunks, and then I'll put a darker mask for the or more solid mask for the leaves, foliage and whatnot. This I need a higher, darker value than the sky. Probably just play with this ultramarine. Might be a little too pure ultramarine right there. This is still wet and wet, and it's a delay tactic to what I want to achieve. I'm also just kind of keeping the value kind of in the same range, just adding variations in the U. And while I'm doing that, I'm just literally just thinking about the right side of the paper and what I can do to achieve it. It's just something that I've been thinking about a lot. I know it doesn't seem like a planned video, but it's eventually just was like, listen, I gotta sit down and try it. I gotta figure out, or at least do my first approach at it. So anyway, the left side of these structures will be darker. The light's coming from there. And while I'm doing this, I'm getting an idea that I could probably trace out my tree on this side with the rigger, and then come back in over it Now, putting in the foliage at the bottom, or just the ground cover, I am attempting from just going a straight line across, just trying to get some variation in there. I must have just got a little bit of Payne's gray on the brush. Seems a little bit darker. And anything darker that we could get to dry darker will give a little bit of depth to this area of trees. The light's going to come in through here and catch on the ground. I mentioned that earlier. So I'm just going to rub out a little bit right there. Kind of let a path take place. And now I am going to mix up some ultramarine and burnt umber. Start playing with how we're going to put this tree in. So while I do this, I'm going to distract myself by talking about what it is that I'm trying to attempt. Okay, so reading in Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, which is a fantastic book, and I mentioned it in my most previous videos, is a concept. He talks a lot about tonal values. So he breaks up landscapes into the simplest of 3 or 4 tonal values. Sky being the lightest, the provider of light. The ground plane, since it is right below the light source, is going to be a second value that you have. It's going to be slightly darker than the sky. And mountains or things like that in the background are going to be on an angle, so they're going to receive less light than the ground, so they'll be darker. And then trees and other upright structures are going to be the darkest, because they're going to receive the least amount of light. So it has to do with the angle that everything is at in regards to the sky itself. Anyway, something that I had read in that book, and I believe Burge Harrison's book, was kind of the interactivity between tonal values, and there's a good drawing to represent this in Carlson's Guide, is that the bigger, darker mass will retain its darker look, while thin, dark masses will essentially kind of, be enveloped by the lighter mass, and vice versa. A lighter mass will, a thinner, lighter mass will be slightly darkened by a dark value around it and whatnot. So anyway, to apply it to the tree, the trunk of the tree would be the darkest. The branches, as they come off, will lighten in value because they are thinner, and the light can kind of start surrounding it. I guess a good example is if you ever see a gradiated drawing of a cylinder, how as you look around the cylinder itself, they'll say lighter, darker, 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 lighter, lighter. And they usually show that, I think, for the purposes of 3D effect, but the concept seems to take place with lights as well, but just it's against darks, and vice versa. So I think so far I'm happy that I'm using the rigger for this tree. And as we go into the sky, trying to get the branches to be lighter in value. Now, the area between them, the light, or the bird holes, that's what some people refer to these spaces between branches or between foliage, will in turn have a perceived or darker value than the outside light that isn't as encroached upon. Burge Harrison in his book had said something like, and this is contrary to some stuff that we see today, which when I see it looks beautiful, where he was like, you wouldn't paint the sky in the bird holes as bright as the sky in another area, because it would look like the tree is strung up with electric lights. And there's contemporary tonalists, and I guess tonalists in general, that have done that, and where they make those spaces between them nice and bright, and it does add a really interesting effect. So I think, maybe every rule or every suggestion can be broken. But that's what I've been kind of dealing with art-wise, what I've been thinking about and trying to figure out. Now I'm going to take the hake and try to embellish these darks. I've just been messing around with the ultramarine and the earth tones mainly. I'm going to try to get the center darker. So I'm trying not to really focus too much on color, more on tone value. I think at the end of the day, that's what I usually do with most of my paintings. I haven't dried anything off either, so it's pretty cool. So I'm trying to keep these darks more towards the generalized center and the larger masses. And I think this approach is working towards two interesting effects. It is giving a potentially 3D option to this. We'll see how it looks when it dries. Here's one thing that I had thought about doing, was just lifting a little bit on the edges. And the whole goal here is to kind of get an atmospheric effect. Also, when I scrape, you can take the back of the brush and scrape as well, make marks. So if you don't have a card handy, or you literally don't want to look up and find the card like I did just now, you can do that. I do see compositionally I kind of have to distract myself for a moment and put the effect of some sort of grass line back here. It's just a little too bland of an area. Okay, back to the main purpose of this painting. I'd wanted to use some indothrone. This fellow Posey Gaines, I think he does like a video a day. He's really like fantastic with his landscape paintings. Very good. You should really check it out if you like watercolor landscape paintings. Very fast and loose. He used the I believe it's indothrone is how you pronounce it, and he uses it to mix his darks. And I had planned on potentially using it for my darks, but so far I seem to be getting the darks that I'm trying to achieve. And I could do the whole foreground darks. I think I will, kind of to just compositionally get a little balance going. But the main goal here is really this experimenting taking place. And I'm working from my imagination as well, just trying to follow some rules I had kind of set forth. I think if I had a photo or a scene that I was working from, I would have benefited a lot more. Not like trying to paint it verbatim, but saying, okay, here's my closest tree. Here's the one that has the luminosity behind it. And this is how I want to approach the tree. I want to approach it where the branches are going to be lighter and the inner trunks, the thicker area, is going to be darker. I think we benefit from one more tree structure. More dark. And you can see that I have variations of wet and dark paper at this point that's affecting this. But in the end, that might just add to the charm of it. Uh-oh, somebody here. So we'll play a little bit right there. Now what I think we might need is just a little foliage texture. And that's one thing I was thinking about, was how you do this as foliage as well, because right now my foliage is going in dark. I probably would have had to do wet and wet with the brush wild like this, and then come back over in a few areas and just add some darks. So that's an experiment for next time. Then, just to tell a story, let's dry off and we'll just put a person in there. Um, Just have a couple. Walking the dog. Maybe they're spotting something over the tree line. Maybe they're talking. Friend. Actually, let's have this person walking their dog too. So say, hey, that's a common place. What type of dog is that? Who's your vet? What's the best vet that you'll take it to? We can even put little birds. Not that anybody will see them with how faint they are, but let's add some activity to the scene. All right, let's you know what? Let's take that into throne that I was talking about. I don't want to really move too far from the regular palette, just in case y'all were following along. But I want to see if we can get that dark into throne. With the burnt umber. I'm just putting in the center of my largest dark objects. The risk here is doing just straight uninterrupted lines, which I don't want to do. All right. I'll let you be the judge to see if that benefited or not. Let me try it off. All right, everything should be good and dry. I need to take out a mat. Put it like that. And then I'll change the camera angle for you all to take a look. Let's see. Oop, I don't have it tightened in there, so let's see. You get a good view? All right, I'll sign it. Hope you enjoyed. Feel free to follow along. I have a whole bunch of different links at the bottom in the comment section, so you can check out my Instagram and my Facebook page and whatnot. And if you're feeling generous, feel free to check out my Patreon. Actually, just looking now, this is on Twitch, and there's somebody who said hello and asked a question. It was Aura Man. It said hello, and it said, you work from impression to distinct impression. I'm thinking what that person might mean by that is having a vague idea of something and then bringing out a more solid form, impression to a distinct impression. Maybe that's what they mean by that. And if that's the case, then yes, where I work vague and wet gives you a vagueness, and then as you dry, you add more pigment. As you work forward, you add more pigment, and you get a more solid form. All right, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you all.